the warmth of a small fire. The night sky was pale and silver, stretched above the broken horizon like an old memory. Wind rolled softly over the abandoned colony fields, carrying the sound of loose metal, the whisper of dry grass, and the faraway hum of sleeping machines. In the middle of all that quiet ruin stood a small house made from old steel plates, patched glass, and hope that refused to die. Inside that house, an alien woman named Lyra stood by a warm cooker, carefully turning a small chicken over in a battered pan, trying to make it smell like home. Lyra's hands were slender and faintly green, with soft glowing lines beneath her skin, the last traces of her people's fading light. Her hair fell down to her waist in tangled silver strands. She wore an old gray dress, patched so many times that even the original cloth could hardly be seen. And yet, her movements were graceful, calm, determined. Beside her, sitting on a wooden crate with her small legs swinging, was Elu, her daughter. Elu was small, maybe 7 human years old, with big, luminous eyes like 2 bright stars and a quiet smile that she always saved for her mother. She had never seen her home world. She was born on the run, carried in her mother's arms through dust storms, through starships, through places where no one smiled. But here, in this small house, she had learned what warmth was. Tonight, Lyra wanted to do something special. She had saved little pieces of currency for months, trading scrap metal and mending clothes for others, just to buy this single chicken. Humans love chicken. She had watched Daniel, the human man who lived down the road, cook it with careful hands and a quiet joy in his eyes. He had given her and Elu blankets when they had nothing. He had built this small cooker when their nights were too cold. He had shared warm water when others turned their backs. He was the only human who didn't look at her like she was something dangerous. And now, after all this time, Lyra wanted to give something back. Elu leaned forward, her bright eyes fixed on the pan. "Mommy, will he like it?" she asked softly, her voice like a breeze. Lyra smiled gently. "I hope so, little star. I hope he will." Elu wrapped her arms around her knees and tilted her head. "I like when he visits. He makes the house feel warm." Lyra didn't answer right away. Her hands moved carefully as she sprinkled the herbs she had traded for last week. She had learned which flavors Daniel liked, the way his face relaxed when he tasted something warm after a long day of work. For her, cooking was not just cooking. It was a small way to say the words she could not say out loud. She was not from this world. She didn't always understand human words, but she understood warmth. She understood care. Outside, the wind grew colder, pushing against the thin walls. It made the house creak softly. Elu shivered a little, pulling the blanket around her. Lyra glanced at her, then stepped away from the pan just long enough to place her warm hands on Elu's shoulders. A soft, natural light radiated from her skin, just enough to warm her daughter. Elu smiled and closed her eyes for a moment. That glow, the last gift of their dying race, was all Lyra had to give her child. A soft knock came at the door. It was gentle, not like the hard pounding of patrols or the cold metal clanging of soldiers. It was the knock she had grown used to hearing on quiet nights. Daniel. Lyra's heart beat faster without her permission. She wiped her hands quickly on a cloth and took a slow breath. She looked at Elu, who grinned and whispered, "He's here." Lyra opened the door. The night air poured in, sharp and cold, but Daniel's presence filled it with something steady. He stood there in his thick coat, carrying a small sack of wood. His hair was messy from the wind, and his hands were rough from work, but his eyes were warm, always warm when they looked at her and Elu. "Evening," he said softly. His voice carried the tired calm of someone who had worked long hours, but still found the strength to smile. "Evening," Lyra answered. Her voice was quiet, her accent soft and different, but she had learned to shape the words slowly so he could understand her. Daniel stepped inside, placing the wood near the wall. The warmth from the cooker touched his face, and he inhaled deeply. "It smells incredible in here." Lyra felt her cheeks warm, though her skin didn't blush like a human's. "I cooked." "For you," she said, each word careful but full of meaning. Daniel blinked, surprised, then smiled slowly. "For me?" She nodded. You gave us warmth, blanket, fire, so I give back. He exhaled softly, a small laugh under his breath. Lyra, you didn't have to. She shook her head quickly, cutting him off gently. I wanted to. Elu ran up to him and wrapped her little arms around his leg. Daniel laughed softly and lifted her into his arms with practiced ease. She giggled and buried her face in his coat, breathing in the scent of the outside world she rarely saw. Lyra watched them silently for a moment, something quiet moving inside her chest. She had been alone for so long that she forgot what trust felt like. But with Daniel, it was slowly returning, like a plant growing again in broken soil. Daniel sat down at the small wooden table, and Lyra carefully brought the cooked chicken to the center. It wasn't perfect, not like the meals he made, but it was warm and smelled of herbs and care. She served him a plate with careful hands. He watched her closely, and she felt shy under his gaze, though it was kind. He took the first bite slowly. For a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Then his eyes softened, and he smiled. Lyra, this is amazing. The sound of those words was like a fire in a frozen room. She let out a slow breath she didn't know she was holding. Elu clapped her hands happily. Mommy's the best cooker! Daniel laughed and nodded. She is. She really is. They ate together slowly. Daniel told Elu stories about the stars and about how the wind once carried songs across the colony. Elu listened with wide eyes, asking 100 tiny questions. Lyra listened too, but more quietly, watching his mouth shape the words, watching his hands move. The way he spoke was gentle, like someone who still believed the world could be kind. After dinner, Daniel stayed to help clean the dishes. Lyra protested softly, but he only shook his head. You cooked. I'll clean. That's the rule. Rule? She repeated, tilting her head. Yes, he said with a soft grin. In my world, when someone makes something with love, the other helps make the work lighter. She watched him wash the plates in the small basin, and something inside her ached, not with pain, but with a quiet warmth she hadn't felt since the day her people disappeared. Elu curled up near the cooker, the blanket wrapped around her. Her small breathing filled the silence like soft music. Daniel glanced at Lyra. She's growing fast, he said softly. Lyra nodded. Too fast, I want her to stay small forever. Daniel chuckled. Every parent feels that. She looked at him carefully. You had parents? Yeah, he said, his eyes flickering with something distant. Long time ago. Before the war. Before everything changed. She didn't ask more. She could see the shadow in his eyes, the same kind that lived in her. Two people from broken worlds sitting together in a small house. No explanations were needed. When the dishes were done, Daniel sat near the small fire, and Lyra joined him. The night outside howled, but inside it was warm. For a long time, they said nothing. Elu slept soundly, her little hand holding the corner of Daniel's coat. Lyra stared into the fire. Daniel, she whispered, almost afraid to speak his name. Why you help us? He didn't answer right away. He stared at the flames as they danced against the metal walls. Because once, he finally said, someone helped me. And because no one should be alone. Not if I can help it. She felt the weight of those words. Not as pity, not as charity, but as something honest. In my world, she whispered, we shared food, warmth. When someone cold, everyone warmed them. But my world. Gone now. Daniel turned to her slowly. Then let's make a new one here, even if it's small. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in many years, she didn't look away. She didn't feel like a stranger anymore. She felt seen. The night stretched on quietly. Daniel told her stories about when Earth was green, before the skies dimmed, before the war burned so much away. Lyra told him stories of rivers that glowed blue at night, of stars that sang, of laughter that echoed through the air. Their worlds were different, but their memories shared the same warmth. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent. The thin walls of the house shivered, but the fire inside was strong. Hours passed like that, not marked by clocks or schedules, but by the soft sound of breathing, the occasional quiet laugh, and the warmth of shared silence. When it grew late, Daniel stood slowly, careful not to wake Elu. I should head back, he said softly. Lyra stood too. She didn't want the night to end, but she didn't know how to say it. She only nodded. At the door, Daniel paused and looked at her. "Thank you. For the meal. For everything." She tilted her head gently. "No, thank you." "For everything," he smiled. "I'll come by tomorrow. Bring some more wood. And maybe we can cook together next time?" Lyra's heart beat faster again. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." He stepped into the cold night and the door closed behind him softly. Lyra stood there for a moment, listening to the wind, feeling the heat of the small fire on her skin. She turned to look at Elu, who was still sleeping peacefully by the cooker, her little hands curled around the blanket. Lyra knelt beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. She whispered softly, "We are not alone anymore, little star." The snow kept falling outside. The world was still broken, but in this small house a light had begun to grow, a light made of shared warmth, a single meal, a kind man, a mother's hope, and a child's innocent trust. And sometimes that is enough to start everything again. Lyra lay down beside her daughter, listening to the quiet breathing and the fire's soft crackle. For the first time in years, sleep came without fear. Outside, the cold world slept too, but inside, the warmth of a small fire burned steady, waiting for tomorrow.